My question to Bob is, Bob, what do you know about the nature of the financial records that were in the O'Mara building and Building 7 in New York? How do you think that relates to some of the things that are happening in finances, and why, for that purpose, those particular buildings were devastated the way they were?
Well, it's never been one of my fortes, that involvement, that black op operation by the people behind and in government. But if I remember correctly, first of all, there was gold in the vaults in the bottom part of one of the structures. But I understand from sources that we have that gold was taken out prior, several days prior to the building coming down. As far as records are concerned, there were a couple of brokerage firms in there, and there was also a government agency in there in which the people who were in those offices got killed, and their records were destroyed. And the government records pertain to clandestine operations and things that involve money and money laundering and stuff like that by people within and connected with the government. And the same thing with the brokerage firms. I think one in particular was Cantor Fitzgerald, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. I really haven't stayed close to that because so many people covered it, and it's just the overview that I have seen from the investigating reporting by others that I form my own opinion that this wasn't a bunch of disgruntled Muslims. This was a U.S. government backdoor operation.
Well, all we need to do is remember, of course, a couple of things. First of all, there were all sorts of military operations that morning that simulated hijacked planes crashing into buildings. There were actually some 28 different hijackings reported that morning, and this is covered in an article in Vanity Fair and covered in my little pamphlet on foreknowledge 9111. And basically, they just intensely confused, the NORAD and FAA, and then, of course, the planes were right close to Washington, D.C., weren't launched. Instead, they launched planes from a long way away, and instead of sending them to Washington, D.C., they sent them out over the Atlantic Ocean. Why would you send planes out over the Atlantic Ocean when Washington, D.C. is just about to be attacked by an incoming hijacked plane? None of this makes sense. But anyway, if you've ever seen the pictures of Shanksville in Pennsylvania, a plane, we're told, crashed into this hole, but there's no luggage. How could you possibly crash a plane into a hole with no luggage there? There was luggage. It was spread over some 8 square miles, but not at the crash site. Maybe we haven't been told the truth. Anything else you want to say, Rob?
No, thank you both for being on the air. God bless and lead you both.
And God bless. And you get the rest of the people there in Santa Cruz listening to us, will you?
Thank you.
God bless. Okay, fine. And our telephone number again, 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Well, Bob, it's my contention, and I'd like your thought on this, that we're seeing the greatest transfer of wealth that has ever occurred in the history of mankind. And of course, they're taking it from the poor people and the middle class people in this country and transferring it to the wealthy. Do you think that that's really what's going on, at least in part?
Absolutely, and I think it compares comparatively with the latter days of the Roman Empire as well. The last 100 years, the corruption was inconceivable. And, of course, it led to the collapse of the empire when it was invaded and overturned. And I don't know that we're going to be invaded by anybody in this instance, but I do know that economically and financially, politically and socially, there's going to be massive changes that people in all countries, many of them are not going to be able to handle. A lot of people are going to die of starvation, never mind intestine warfare. This is going to be terrible, nasty, awful, and it's not something to look forward to. And, all of the things that you and I have been talking about for the last 12 years or so on your program, and that is get out of debt, particularly credit card debt, get your insurance, which is dehydrated and freeze-dried foods, a water filter, a way to defend your family, and then get gold and silver-related assets if you can afford to do so. And that's what you got to do. You and I have been singing the same song for a long time, and we've saved people an awful lot of grief already.
Well, I do know that a lot of our listeners certainly have got themselves out of the stock market and positioned themselves in precious metals, and they've laid in the supplies. They're ready for the difficult times. At least they're not going to panic. What bothers me is that as things get worse, people are going to panic, and that's the worst thing in the world you can do. If you know what's coming, you understand what's coming, you make the preparations for it, you have your relationship with the Lord, because this is a spiritual battle. The people who've done that are going to be able to survive. It may be difficult, but at least they'll be survive and ability to help others. The rest of the people, and you try to tell them now, and most of them just sort of look at you and yawn, or they sort of sticker, why shortage of food in America, why? That couldn't happen. Collapse of our economy, a collapse of our currency, the destruction, of the integrity of our society, and the beginning breakdown of areas and not being able to get adequate health care. That may happen in other countries, but it would never happen here. And I would like to ask, if God is just, why couldn't it happen here? Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. We're talking about some of the things that are going on today. And of course, it's amazing if you stop and think of it. You can go into Detroit today, you can buy a home there on average for $18,000. Last year they were $40,000. This year they're $18,000, and who knows where they'll be next year. You may be able to get a home in Detroit for $10,000. Well, but that'll never happen in California. And why would you think it wouldn't happen in California, for the average home if things continue going the way that we do, and there's increasing social unrest, and everything points to the fact that this is exactly where we're going to. We've got Mark calling from San Jose. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Doc. I've read this book, The Creature from Jekyll Isle, by Edward Griffith,
right.
And you were interviewed by Craig Roberts on KFAX 1100, and I gave him that book, and I gave Lee Rogers on KSFO 560 the Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. What do you think about those books, and what are those books all about?
Well, why don't you answer that, Bob, and then I'll answer.
Well, I'll do one and you do the other.
All right,
and,
which one do you want?
Ed Griffith's been a friend of mine for 48 years.
No, he'd been my friend for 46 years. You go right ahead.
Well, I'm older than you are.
I know you are.
You're older than me. But anyway, the book is fantastic. It happened that way. It's easy to read. It's informed millions and millions of people. I've been recommending it for years, just like Stan has. And on top of it, he's a prince of a guy, one of the nicest people I've ever met. And Tragedy and Hope tells you exactly what the Illuminists were doing before and during that time that it was written, and what their goals are.
That book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, was written by a liberal college professor. His name was Professor Quigley. But he was an honest man. Now, he, of course, liked the idea of an elite ruling the world. He had actually researched what was going on in England and found there was a secret society there. He tracked that for 20 years. He wrote a book called The Anglo-American Establishment. Could never get that book actually published until after he died. We do carry the book. But Tragedy and Hope was so revealing because it goes into the background of finance. It goes into the background of the central banks. On page 324, it talks about how the central bankers of the world, first of all, the central bankers create money out of nothing. That's page 325, quoting one of the bankers over there in Great Britain. The most carefully kept secret is that bankers create money out of nothing. But on 324, he talked about how the bankers had secret meetings. in which they plotted on how they were going to control the respective countries, and their goal was to set up a feudalistic system. Well, of course, the book was so revealing that somebody came in, bought up the publisher, Macmillan, and actually destroyed the plates in the first half of the book so it couldn't be reprinted. And we have that whole story on an interview with Professor Quigley where he tells that. We're the only people who have it. Of course, I'm sure other people have circulated it now, but I purchased the right to the tape from Professor Quigley's widow. And Professor Quigley tells how his book was actively suppressed for many years and then how it came to be back in print again. But we carry the book, we carry both of the books. The Creature from Jekyll Island by Ed Griffin tells the story of the Federal Reserve System that was created by the bankers, for the bankers, to enrich the bankers, and ultimately to destroy this nation. And then, of course,